Hello, creative spirits. Welcome to another episode of Your Creative and Magical Life, which is hopefully your real life, but also this podcast. I'm your host, Cecily Saylor. I'm a witch, I'm a weirdo, I'm a creativity coach and a tarot reader, and your champion for creativity and magic in unprecedented times, as they say. And today we're going to do some tarot reading on the show. I have two questions from folks in the community, listeners, and members of the Creative Magic Collective now. And I recently asked on my email list a couple questions of the subscribers about how they were turning to the cards lately and what kind of questions, burning questions they had for the cards. So, with two of these that I received, I wanted to bring them on the air and pull cards for these folks and also take all of you through a little tarot reading because I think the questions and the situations that these two lovely people have shared will resonate with many of you. These may be things that you're feeling and experiencing right now. So we'll bring the cards into the show directly this time. And yeah, let's get into it. So the first question that I asked, there were two questions. The first question was, what's prompting you these days to turn toward your cards, or what keeps you away from them? That's two questions really combined into one question. And the real second question is also two questions. What questions are you asking your cards these days? Or if I offered to pull a card for you, what would you want to know? What would you ask tarot to help you with? So I received two really incredible answers, and we'll start with querent number one, seeker number one. So this person writes, I keep looking at my various tarot and oracle cards and not reaching for them. Part of me wants to, part of me is exhausted, and it feels like it takes more energy than I have right now to keep the magic alive, which is sad because that's the life I want. One dripping with wonder and meaning and holy strangeness. And here I am using my limited energy to work on stuff I don't care about that much to scrape enough money to afford my life. There has to be a better way. I know there is. I just haven't found it yet. So I feel like this person, I'll refer to this person as holy strangeness because I just love that phrase. And I think what they're describing here is really common. And I suspect that many folks listening may be experiencing this too, that you see your deck sitting over there across the room, or you think about your cards, they pop into your mind, and you think, yeah, I should really maybe pull those babies out and see what they got to say. Or you just know, you remember that it feels good to sit with your deck, to get still for a second, to really focus on how you're feeling and what's on your mind, what's on your heart. And then commune with something outside yourself, something unseen. Obviously, the tarot cards are visible and seen, but if you work with the cards, you know that there are some unseen consciousnesses, let's say, communing and speaking to us through the cards. Sometimes we know what those are, sometimes we don't, and sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes we just decide what those consciousnesses are. Some people think that we're talking to our highest self, we're talking to the unconscious self. Some people think we're talking to our entire spiritual team all at once, or maybe an ancestor, or some combination of these. I tend to think it's kind of all lumped together, or that perhaps one kind of consciousness is stepping forward in a reading, and then another one may step forward in a different kind of reading, depending on what we're going through, what we're asking about, what we're needing. I don't know how it all works, right? I just like to think of the ways that bring me a sense of enchantment about the whole process. So, this feeling exhausted, that Holy Strangeness writes about feeling like it takes more energy than they have to even pick up the deck to kind of bring in a little bit of magic, even though this is the life they want. They want a life with tarot cards, infusing their days, bringing a little bit of magic and joy into the experience of life. But instead, with the limited energy that they have, it's just a lot of focus on stuff that doesn't necessarily interest them in service to making enough money to live. And this predicament harkens back to exactly some of the things I've been talking about in the couple previous episodes, particularly around capitalism. This is sort of the overall effect of capitalism on our lives. The fact that we pretty much always need money in order to access the things we need to survive makes it so that pretty much all of our lives is oriented around obtaining money, retaining money, and spending money, and monitoring our money constantly to make sure we're going to be able to live. And it's totally a mind fuck because we know, like, on the one hand, money is a real thing. Like, everyone is having to deal with it. Sometimes we have cash, that's like a real thing, but it's also a abstract thing. It's sort of an idea. It's a representation of value and one that just like we've all collectively bought into pretty much. So we're all oriented toward this thing, this entity that's very hard to kind of understand, like what is money really? But we have to think about it pretty much constantly. Um, Even if we have a lot of it. Like if you have a lot of money, then you're thinking about how do I get more? Or you're thinking about like what happens if I lose it? So it's a psychological gauntlet that we really have to travel most of our lives. And it is exhausting. It means many of us, and especially if we're creative, kind of weird people who are into things like holy strangeness, right? Lots of the jobs we're going to find for ourselves may be satisfying only up to a point. Um, and we have to give a lot of our time, a lot of our energy, a lot of our creativity, a lot of our expertise, a lot of our intelligence or intellect to these efforts that to us are not actually deeply meaningful, just so we can have this thing called money that, again, we don't fully even like understand what it is, even though we also do. Does that make sense? So, yeah, this is what capitalism does to us. It leaves us tired, it leaves us drained. I think I'm not, it's coming to mind right now, but I can't like remember exactly what was said to me or who said it to me. But I think there's some new psychological awareness emerging around um, like the drain on our soul from the boredom of work. And it may have actually been this person I was speaking to who told me about it. But this idea that we have to, yeah, do work that just doesn't interest us that much. And a lot of it's repetitive, sometimes it's wasted, sometimes it doesn't produce anything that we feel is very meaningful. And it's just not that interesting. Yet for the paycheck, we go and do it. And again, we spend a lot of our time and energy in these pursuits that are just not personally meaningful to us in any way. And the boredom of that is another drain on our life force. So, magic, of course, and creativity are life-giving pursuits. They will take us out of that drudgery, that sense of like being on the hamster wheel. They will break that pattern of like, what is this all about? Why am I doing this? Is this my life? How, like, am I doing this till I'm 75? Because that's the other thing when you think about there's not a time really when we get to stop thinking about money, which means we're all also wondering, like, when do I get to stop thinking about working? Will I ever be safe to not work? And that's a huge energetic and psychological drain as well. But when we bring creativity and magic into our life, when we make a little space for it, we get some relief from that big drain. We get some energy poured back into our cups. And I think that can help us like reorient in terms of, yes, I may have to work. Yes, I may have to do things I don't really want to do. Yes, I may have to keep thinking about money. But the cards and the magic and the creativity are reminding me that there's way more to life than this. And I can bring these things into my life in order to make it possible for me to keep going or make it possible for me to turn away from the drudgery or the boredom or the drain and tune into something that does actually feel personally significant and resonant to me. I also find that when I'm pulling cards, I feel like I'm not so alone. And, many of us work remotely, or if you're running your own business, you're often working mostly by yourself, unless you have a team, and that's great. But there's also a kind of loneliness to our work sometimes, I think. And I feel like when I'm working with the cards, that there's something, someone, some consciousness, as I said, that is co-present with me. I feel less alone. I feel more cared for. And I feel like there's more possibility. So it really helps elevate me, kind of lift me out of um, that big gravitational pull of being incarnated on Earth and having to deal with consensus reality day in and day out. So, obviously, going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but this question and this concern that holy strangeness is offering is just really important, I think. It's something to talk about because I think so many of us do feel this in this time. And I just wanted to speak to that. So that's for holy strangeness. That's for all of us. And if you're feeling this too, I don't know, give a shout out wherever you are. Be like, yes, that's me. Thank you. Um, but let's get to holy strangenesses questions for the cards. Okay. They say, if you were to pull a card for me right now, I think I'd probably just say help. The surface questions, how do I move from here? Where do I go? How do I get there? Feel heavy and kind of flat, like they're really not the right questions. I'm having wild recurring dreams of floods and tides and big weather that's outside my control, and I'm not sure where the thread to follow is. What is the dream asking of me that I'm not seeing? So it comes back to show me again and again. Maybe I'd ask about that. So I love this. I love this response as well. Like just this question of like, it's not even a question, it's just kind of a plea. It's a cry for help. Like, help. How do I break this cycle? What can change? Just help me move away from this feeling or this rut or this stuckness. And so I'm going to pull a card for just the help part because I really want to honor, there are some great questions here, like how do I move from here? Where do I go? How do I get there? But as Holy Strangeness is saying, those questions don't even feel right. So it is good to have some questions. Sometimes when we're pulling cards, we don't always need a question. Many times when I'm pulling cards, especially like my daily pull, I guess it's a question. It's sort of a general, like, what do you want me to see today? But sometimes I don't even like, explicitly bring that question to mind. I'm just like the cards know. It's like, what's there for me today? What do I need? So, great questions are great for tarot, and maybe there's a whole episode to do on that. But I also think it's okay to just be in this place of confusion and almost a sense of helplessness or lostness. I don't think this person is helpless, but I think we can feel when we feel really stuck, when we feel like we're in a cycle or a pattern that is starting to become really tiresome. And now, like, starting to feel like it's even becoming like ingrained in our day to day, then just this like please help me kind of cry is something I want to honor and something that's absolutely okay to bring to your cards. So I also want to say that like let yourself use them in a range of ways. You can come to your cards with a kind of clear intention, clear thought, something you really want to look into. There's like a spread you're doing, or it's the new moon or the full moon or whatever. But it's also okay to be a hot mess and come to your cards like that. I'm not saying Holy Strangeness is a hot mess, but I have come to my cards as a hot mess. And it really feels like a communion with spirit, like one of those moments when we're at our wits' end, we're really feeling like we can't find an answer or a path or a crack in the heaviness to kind of move through, or we're just feeling a tremendous amount of pain for whatever reason. And so I will sit sometimes when I'm in those places emotionally and psychologically, I'll just sit with my deck. I will say hello to guides and ancestors and spirits and teachers. And then I will just talk about my problem. I will be like a snotty, weepy person holding the cards and just saying, this happened. And then it makes me feel like this. And I'm worried that this and this and this, and just let it be like the kind, you sort of feel like you're 6 years old coming home from a bad day at school and just like telling your mom everything. And she may not even be able to understand you in all the like emotional messiness of it, but just letting it out in that way. And then we can end, when we get all this stuff out, we can just say help. And then we can pull a card. And so that's okay too. You do not need to be in a clear headspace or a clear heart space in order to pull cards. You can be in any kind of state. I will say one little caveat is that if you're in a highly anxious state and you pull cards, but there's something either about your state of mind where whatever you see, or maybe you get cards that feel difficult or challenging, the anxiety may say like, oh, here's the cards just like telling me it's going to get worse. And then we like pull more cards and we become more confused. That can be one place where kind of like being in that hot mess arena and coming to the cards can be a little counterproductive. So if it's just kind of like an emotional heaviness, a sadness, a confusion, an anger, that I think that can work when you're just like really wanting to reach out for support. But if you're in a state of high anxiety, like I said, it kind of depends on the person, depends on you. There's no, you know, you get to use the cards and come to the cards how you want to, but that's just kind of my experience thus far. So let's pull some cards at last. Let's get to the thing I promised. So I'm going to start with this question of help. I'm using the Liberation Tarot, really beautiful deck made by multiple creators. Asking the cards, what can you share with Holy Strangeness as they cry out for help. I'm gonna pull two cards here. Take a little sip. I hear my voice cracking. So, in response to this cry for help, the cards have given this card that's called Ancestors, but would also be the Hierophant in any other kind of deck. And in this deck, I'm looking at a dark ocean. It's like you can kind of see the sea floor. It looks a little bit like the background of like a ultrasound or something, the sea floor there. And then kind of the same thing up at the top, which would seems to represent the surface of the water. And then between those two little strips of like kind of ultrasound looking black, slightly illuminated field, there's just a straight black field with a kind of octopus floating, a large octopus taking up almost all of the other space. It's a totally clear creature. It looks a little bit like a squid and an octopus at the same time. And yes, all clear, and its eyes facing forward. And then we have, again, this implication of ancestors. And we also have the Nine of Flowers, which would be the Nine of Pentacles in most decks. And here we see a very different kind of vibe. There's a yellow sky that looks a little bit pixelated, and then a green hill. And as we get closer toward the viewer in the card, there look to be a couple rows of a vineyard, and a little bit, we can see a little bit of an edge of a road or a walkway going off in the right bottom corner. And so it's kind of like we're in maybe the Sonoma Valley or something like that. And this vineyard here, and there's a hourglass floating or toward the right side. It's kind of floating. A little bit of it is in the sky, but most of it is covering the hillside. And it's containing this like pink, purpley colored sand, kind of the color of like Merlot or some red wine. And there's more sand in the top than there is in the bottom. And then there are nine little yellow flowers creating a semicircle, a half circle that goes from the top of the hourglass around to the bottom of the hourglass. So, two very different images. And in response to this cry for help, this is really interesting. So, with the ancestors card, that is also the Hierophant, I feel like this card is reaching out to holy strangeness to say the ancestors are with you. And that goes like not only for human ancestors, but our evolutionary ancestors. Like we are all descended, all living things are descended from creatures of the sea. And so the octopus is one of our ancient ancestors. And when we talk about ancestors, we are often thinking about the living humans in our bloodline. Sometimes we're thinking about chosen ancestors, like people who have done the kind of work that we seek to do ourselves creatively, or who have brought to the planet some really powerful art or thought or um, something that adds to the culture in some way. We could think of them as ancestors, even if we may not be related to them. But I think we often forget about the other different kinds of beings that we are evolved from. And so this feels like a reminder to holy strangeness that um, they come from a long line of living beings, and that yes, we are human, but we are also animal. Just because we're human, we're not separate from the animal world, something I wish more people understood and cared about. And there feels like something like this is an animal with a very soft body. And this is an animal that can survive deep in the ocean and has survived on this planet for thousands, maybe millions of years. And so to Holy Strangeness, I feel like there's this message that you are an animal too. You are not meant to be working, doing things you don't care about all the time. And there's an invitation here to sort of remember that you are an animal who seeks to rest and play and be nourished and be in community and explore and adventure and not just sit in front of a machine so that you can get some like credits deposited into your account. And maybe this kind of like this idea that like yeah I'm older than this modern day job. I'm older than these constructs around capitalism. Like I come from something much more resilient, and I come from something that has traveled the depths of the ocean. And like seeing this card, I know you can't see it with me, but looking at it really makes me think that um like if I were feeling this cry for help and I saw this card, I think it would kind of shake me loose. If I was feeling the way that Holy Strangeness feels, which I've definitely felt, this message from the ancient ancestor octopus in this card feels like a kind of embrace or a kind of like little cold tentacle on the shoulder that's saying like you are not born to do this. Like you can do it and it's not wrong to do it, but don't let it consume you. Like you are ancient. You like to be in the depths. You like to be in the holy strangeness. Like, oh my God, now I see it. Like this octopus is the holy strangeness. Ancestors are holy, whatever kind of ancestor they were, even if they were the shitty kind. There's something sacred about them because we can look at their legacy and we can define ourselves differently. And that is something that's sacred and holy. And then we have this Nine of Flowers, the Nine of Pentacles, which is a card of like independence, of luxury, of having sovereignty over your life, showing the vineyard in this card is like a place where, many people like to go to relax and enjoy and vacation and like taste the fruits of the vineyard and eat cheese and like not be working, not be tied to a computer, but look out at the hillside and watch the sunset. And so the ancestors card is kind of like speaking from this very like soul level, this very like other realm kind of spiritual place. And the Nine of Pentacles feels like it's like talking about the stuff that we do have to deal with on earth. But this one is saying like you're your own being. Like you are independent. You have agency. There's something you've created in your life that allows you to be free in certain ways. Like, yes, you must do this job, or this is the job you're doing right now to make the money, but you don't have to let it take over your existence and your life. You still have agency. You've still been making a lot of decisions up to this point that allows you to do the things you love. And I've had a conversation with this person since they submitted this question, and um, I know like they live on their own. They live in a beautiful town in kind of a tropical place. I think they're not far from the water. And so, and they're not like, bound by, let's say, a relationship or having children. Um, And so they have like freedom to kind of spend some of their time or maybe even all of their time how they would like. Of course, there's the time we must allocate to the making of money, unfortunately. But this card feels like you deserve the enjoyment, and you've actually been making choices over the years to allow yourself this enjoyment. So it's like, would you go to Sonoma and just like not drink the wine? I mean, I wouldn't, I don't drink anymore, but like that's not what you would do. So if you've kind of created certain beautiful, like a beautiful lifestyle for yourself in many ways, don't let yourself be overcome by the drudgery. Like there's plenty here to be enjoyed, and that can be your antidote. So these two things, like it doesn't feel like either of these cards is really like, yeah, get out your deck and like get in a routine and like bring the magic back. They seem to be speaking from a kind of like reminder place. Like you are ancient. You have ancestors that are um like otherworldly, that are miracles on this planet just like you. And you do still have freedom and you do still have plenty to enjoy around you. And you've done a good job cultivating a life that gives you space. So use the space, take the space, phone it into the job a little bit more. Um, and maybe just hearing these things, I'm thinking, might inspire a person to pick up their deck a little more often. And like every little dose, like every card, every check-in with the deck, it's the same as exercise. It's like after you do, once you like quit working out, there's all this inertia we have to overcome to get back to the workout or to get back into the routine. But once we do the one workout, it's like, okay, I think I can do this tomorrow. If it's like, a reasonable sort of workout for someone who's coming back after a hiatus, right? So it's a reinforcing loop, just like the same way that sort of like the drudgery can reinforce itself and kind of suck us into a place of stasis. The action, the breaking of the drudgery, the communing with the magic in micro doses can also be a reinforcing loop that brings us back more and more. So those are the two cards for help, but I want to also get to this last question. I'm having wild recurring dreams of floods and tides and big weather that's outside of my control, and I'm not sure where the thread is to follow. What is the dream asking of me that I'm not seeing? So it comes back to show me again and again. Maybe I'd ask about that. So one thing I want to say about this is like, wow, what a remarkable and also scary sort of dream to have, especially a recurring dream. And I can see, I think it's beautiful to work with our dreams, to pay attention to our dreams, to stay curious about our dreams, write down dreams when you bring things into your awakened world from the dream that you remember. I'd love to think about dream interpretation. This Jungian Life is one of my favorite podcasts where at the end of every episode, they interpret a dream. They offer something called Dream School. And one day I hope to sign up for a dream school. But their position around dreams is that like everything in the dream is a reflection of us. And here I'm not hearing a lot in this dream about like other people, but these really huge weather events. And the other thing I'm noticing is just like these dreams actually seem kind of prophetic. I don't think every dream is like rich with instructional meaning. Sometimes we're just like processing things and I also think that sometimes people receive visions in their dreams that aren't necessarily like about them, but are showing them something about the future or about the world. So to me, I find this really interesting because this question came before. the flooding began at the beginning of July. And this person lives very far away from me on the other side of the world. I live in Austin, about an hour from where the July 4th floods took place. Um, that part of the hill country is quite beautiful, and I've been there dozens of times, and it is heartbreaking and scary to see the devastation that's happened there and the lives that have been lost, and just the magnitude of the destruction from these floods and some of the um, I know that climate change contributes to the magnitude of the flooding. And then we are also seeing how humans who have responsibility and authority in some of these places have sidestepped some of that or made choices that could, like in the opportunity to do more to protect people along the river, things were not done. And so it's just incredibly tragic. And, you know, Central Texas was not the only place that has experienced flooding in the last few weeks. There have been massive flooding in other parts of the United States and in other parts of the world. This is all the result of climate change. And so I feel like, on one level, um, Holy Strangeness is getting dreams about flooding because there were floods coming. And it's like an era of flooding. There's more, the frozen water on the planet is starting to melt. It's moving into the ocean. The oceans are getting warmer. The whole planet is getting warmer. The atmosphere can hold more water when it's warmer, which is why here in Texas, we've been seeing like lots of clouds, lots more rain. And this is not the time of year when it's usually very rainy. It's usually just straight hot. And it's still hot, but it's less hot because there's more moisture in the air. But for maybe like 10 days to 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, we were getting rain very regularly and sometimes a lot of rain. And so that's very unusual. But the sky, the warm air, can hold more water vapor and dump more water. And that's just happening in more and more places. And I almost feel like um, this dreamer, Holy Strangeness, has been given something sort of like futuristic to be aware of. But of course, there's also, this question about what the dream could mean for the dreamer. And yeah, it may feel like this reflection of an inundation, a deluge of information, of change, of just, yeah, like water is a beautiful thing, but it's also highly destructive in great quantities when it's moving very quickly. And right now, we're just experiencing an incredible amount of change at an incredible rate, more than I think we're able to really wrap our heads around. And it's very disconcerting. It's very, very fear-inducing. So, just some thoughts about this dream, but let's see what the cards have to say. What is the dream asking of me that I'm not seeing? Okay, first we have the Hermit. I'll pull one more as well. Really interesting. This has already a kind of parallel with the first pair of cards, in that the first card is a major arcana card, this in this case the Hermit, and the second card is a minor arcana card and also a Pentacles card, the Two of Pentacles. And so the Hermit in this deck is really trippy. You can see kind of like a dark, um, two mountains that are descending into the middle of the image. So they like the valley is like right in the center, and then you see these black mountains climbing up from the bottom. And then there are two hands that are overlapping. It's almost like they're reaching around the top of the mountain, and their fingers are overlapping down into the valley. And one hand is blue. It's got stars, it's a hand and an arm. The arm is blue with little white stars. There's a green snake that's curling around the arm. And at the head of the snake, which rests kind of in the center of the hand, there's a white disc, like a moon, and these white beams coming off the moon that reach out into the fingertips. The other arm is yellow and it has also a white disc, like the sun, with white sunbeams radiating from it. So those hands are crossing at the base of the valley. And then above the hands is this figure, a brown skinned woman in a kind of like blue tank top. And her hands are crossed in front of her. She's holding a candle and she's looking straight at me. She's got pink hoop earrings and this hair, this kind of like hair that circulates around her almost like an aura that looks a little bit like smoke. And some of the smoke is green and some of it is white. And from her eyes, there are two vectors coming out. There's like these radiating vectors from her eyes. And then within those vectors, there's like two bubbles. There's a bubble on each vector up in the like corners of the card where the eye is closed. So it's almost like her eyes are kind of like beaming out, and yet they're closed at the same time. At the root of the valley, there's some kind of little portal and there's some candles dotted along the black mountain. Very involved card. I hope that made a little bit of sense. Really rich. We'll come back to that. And then there is the Two of Flowers or the Two of Pentacles, which interestingly shows a beach with a wave crashing. And then kind of hovering in the middle of the beach where you might expect a sun setting is a kind of black disc that looks like a plate or a piece of black Tupperware or a vinyl record. And then in the middle, at the top of the record, there's two forks balancing, making a V. And then between them is a spoon. It's kind of balancing between them. And then in the triangle that the spoon and the forks are making, there's another little disc that looks exactly like the disc at the center of the record, which is kind of blue and pink. There's a blue sky. And so a bit more of a simple card. But one thing I'm noticing is how both the Two of Pentacles, which is an earth card where I guess you do see water in the Two of Pentacles traditionally. But we've got water in the Two of Pentacles, and we have this deep underwater ocean, this kind of abyss that we saw in the first pull with the Ancestors card and the squid. So that water is kind of like recurring. But in response to this question, what is the dream asking of me that I'm not seeing? The Hermit makes me think that the dream is maybe showing that Holy Strangeness does have some kind of psychic connection. Like the Hermit is on this kind of like in this moment, in this image, is having a multi-layered kind of consciousness experience. There's the eyes beaming outward. There's the hands reaching inward, almost as large as a mountain. This is very, yeah, like very trippy. And so this hermit figure looks like um, through their inward gaze, because again, the two eyes are closed, that there's so much happening. There's so much information that's available as the hermit is sort of turned into the self, holding this candle, this pairing of like light and dark, the sun and the moon. This force of brightness and this force of renewal in the snake that's encircling the arm. And it's almost like, yeah, a vision from a dream. And the hermit here has their eyes closed as though dreaming. And so there's an invitation here as well, I think, to honor the dreamer's powers, like the gifts, the consciousness, the insights that the dreamer can access when they are not only when they're trying, like not even when they're not trying, but probably especially when they are doing their kind of magical work. Like seeing these cards, it feels like a little bit of a shame. Not to shame Holy Strangeness in any way, no shame. But this is a magical person. I think we're all magical, but I feel like the Hermit is especially underscoring that, along with the Ancestor card and the other question. And like Holy Strangeness has the ability to tap into something really big, to tap into the realms where time collapses or time expands, and where messages and visions are meaningful and significant and have something to do with reality down here on Earth, which is what we see in the Two of Flowers or the Two of Pentacles. And so it's like the in the Two of Flowers, we're literally seeing a wave crashing, very related to water or flooding. And this disc where there's this balancing act happening on top of it. The Two of Pentacles is how we navigate competing things here on Earth, like competing interests, competing things on our calendar, where we kind of juggle a lot of responsibilities or tasks. And so it's like the Hermit is saying, we invite you to come into your inner world and to explore your connection to other dimensions and other realms and sources of information that are not exactly earthly, so that you can, as a way to help you navigate what's happening here on Earth and to help you kind of like sort your own life, but also like navigate some of the big challenges that are happening, the flooding, the climate change. And I know this person is a environmentally conscious person at the same time. And so I wonder a little bit if that cycle of not reaching for the deck or feeling too drained to commune with the cards is also a little bit of resistance from the power of the magic that might come through. Like it's hard to receive and to deal with these visions, these big visions and big images that are available to us when we also have to turn around and again get on a computer and try to do a bunch of things that we don't really care about so we can make money. It's like, how do I square these two vastly different experiences? One, great big visions that are even hard to decipher, and then the kind of like everyday routines and things that I have to do to live here on earth in capitalism. And so it makes sense that there might even be extra resistance because it's like, I don't even want to touch the cards because, like, I can't really handle making the bridge between what they give me and the other things I have to do here on Earth. That being said, I feel like the cards are also inviting this person back. Like, you are a magical, holy, strange person, and don't let like the drudgery of life deplete that from you. And I almost feel like the dreams of big floods are the intensity of that is meant to kind of like push you back into some of this. It's like if you're not, it's like the if the dam is closed for a long time, the water's going to back up and build up. And so when it does overcome the dam or when the gates open, the floodgates open, then the flooding comes through. But if we can do a bit more of this communion with magic more regularly, there's not so much of a bottleneck. And I feel like spirit is just really wanting to work with this person and wanting, if you want holy strangeness, like it's there in your dreams, it will be there in the cards. And there's something here, especially in the Two of Pentacles, about your ability to navigate that. Like it's available, but also something you can continue to work on, creating that bridge between strange, undecipherable visions and dealing with the reality of living here on Earth in 2025. So it took me way more time and way more words than I intended, as is usually the case. I don't know if I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but my Mercury is in Sagittarius. So there's a lot of words, and it's also right next to Neptune. So there's also a lot of rabbit holes. But I love this question. I'm actually going to save the next question for a second episode since I've taken some time here. But a really rich question, a series of questions and experiences that I think we can relate to. So I hope that these questions from our Holy Strange listener were helpful to you. And I hope these answers from the cards brought something that you needed to hear or wanted to hear or didn't know you wanted to hear until you heard it. And I want to invite more listeners to share their questions so I can pull cards for you on the podcast if this is something that feels interesting. And I'm going to welcome and invite. You can tell me like a predicament around your creativity, around your magic, or you can also send a little story, like something strange that happened to you. Maybe like a strange synchronicity or a coincidence or a series of kind of like synchronous messages you've been getting. Like maybe you've been seeing like a fox every other day for 2 weeks and you haven't seen a fox before that for 2 years. And you're like, what the fuck is a fox trying to talk about? So I can pull some cards for that. And I really want to hear like what you're experiencing. I also, we'll get into this more in October. I'm also a freak for paranormal and supernatural encounters. So if you have any of those, feel free to send in a little paragraph or a few paragraphs. Again, you can share about a predicament, a situation, a recurring theme, a dream, a paranormal encounter, and I'll share your situation and also send a question that you want to ask the cards. Maybe a couple questions, 1 to 3 questions. Yeah. And I'll also keep like prompting the invitation for these questions via my email list. So if you're not signed up for that, you can do that by going to the show notes. You can see a little link for that. I email about once a week and you'll just know more about what's going on at Typewriter Tarot. So I want to thank Holy Strangeness for sharing and for bringing these beautiful questions and experiences. And if you noticed anything listening to these questions, or hearing what the cards had to say, or the dreams, if you've had dreams of floods, reach out. We can share that on the podcast. We can share that with Holy Strangeness as well. And I appreciate y'all listening and being here with me, especially after a little break between episodes. I hope to bring you more regularly. And I'll do a second piece from another listener coming to you soon. I'm wishing you I'm wishing you communion with your magic, communion with your holy sacredness, and um, yeah, just more creativity, more magic in your days, in your hours, in your minutes. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.